Our next question, Jim, sent to cornydrivethru@gmail.com from Michael in Northern California. I have a hypothetical question. If Ric Flair had been unable to wrestle again after the plane crash, who does Jim think would have been the top guy for Jim Crockett Promotions in the 1980s?
Oh, good
God. Does he think anyone could have had the number of runs with the NWA belt that Rick had? Or does he think the spot would have gone to several different people with shorter runs?
Well, that would be highly more likely. I don't know how you could even answer that. It's a what if, right? If a frog had wings, he wouldn't bump his ass on the ground, all that stuff. If Flair had not been able to come back, they didn't know at the time of the plane crash that they knew they had a budding young rookie star that had all the tools, the potential, and a lot of personality. But you forget that they didn't know what they didn't know, which was that Ric Flair was going to be the biggest fucking deal they had for the next 40 years. So they weren't specifically trying to create the biggest star of modern times. They were just trying to get a guy over in their territory. So they wouldn't have known what was lost, and they wouldn't have known what they were trying to replace. But just as far as being a top guy, if Flair never wrestled again, let's say Johnny Valentine wasn't in the plane crash. Let's say that Johnny Valentine then, went on to probably retire over the next couple of years and anoint somebody else as the top guy rather than there being a void, because Valentine had been that top guy at that period of time. Maybe it'd have been Wahoo McDaniel. Maybe Wahoo McDaniel would have turned heel and put that young Ricky Steamboat over. Who knows? But nobody would have been that dominant for that long period of time, because that was not a spot that was trying to be filled by the promoters by putting Flair in it. They were trying to get a guy over in their territory. The more the guy gets over, the better they use him, and the longer they use him, and the more they use him in. They had every top name in the NWA at their disposal at that time. So it could have been Blackjack Mulligan, or it could have been Wahoo McDaniel, or it could have been Tim Mr. Wrestling Woods, or it could have been Greg Valentine, or it could have been Jimmy Snuka, or it could have been Roddy Piper. Somebody was going to be the top babyface or the top heel, or somebody we don't even know. But almost nobody was going to get over to that level and last that long. That was what Flair did because he was unique, pretty much. I don't know. Did I say that right?
We've asked the question in the past, who would have replaced Hulk Hogan? If Vince McMahon, when he went national, didn't have Hogan, who would he have used in that spot? Jim Crockett Promotions in the 80s. If Ric Flair goes to the WWF in 1984, who does Jim Crockett Jr. have in that spot as the top guy? I don't know if you want to go with Dusty. He's the booker.
Well, Dusty would have wanted to go with Dusty.
Dusty would have wanted to go with Dusty, but how big of a hit would it have been to Mid-Atlantic / Jim Crockett Promotions if they lost Flair in 84 or 85? And who, if anybody, could have replaced him in that spot of being the top guy?
It would have fucking hurt bad, and I don't know if anybody could have. And see, here's the thing. Flair, even though he was a babyface for those few years in the Carolinas, and that's when Dusty took the book and got things going national, the first thing he had to do was do that angle where Flair and the Horsemen fucked him up to clearly make them heels, even Ric Flair a heel in the Carolinas, because they were twin titans, twin towers as dueling babyfaces in the Carolinas, even when Flair was the heel nationally and Dusty was the babyface nationally. So if you'd have lost Flair, what Dusty probably would have done, because he was the equivalent on the babyface side as far as name value, box office draw, and we're not talking about 30 years later people remembering Dusty as fat and wearing polka dots. We're talking about at that time the three biggest names, and Andre was slowing down. So let's say the three biggest names for box office in 1986 in wrestling are Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Dusty Rhodes. Would you concur?
Certainly Hogan. We're talking about domestically, of course, not.
Well, yeah, and don't give me the asterisk with Inoki and Baba, or in Mexico with a hold. I'm talking about in the North American wrestling scene, the three biggest names at the box office in 1986 would have been Hogan, Flair, and Dusty. I would think, and then and maybe Savage, because
not really yet.
or whoever in the WWF, whoever Hogan's top Orndorff that year, they were drawing huge money.
Yeah.
But Flair and Dusty had been around. It wasn't like a hot program. Flair and Dusty had both been hot for years at that point, and Andre was slowing down. So those are the guys. So if Flair goes to the WWF, I would be pretty sure that Dusty would, in the short term, build around himself as the NWA champion, vanquishing fucking heels, because he was still building Magnum. And then he would have probably tried to find, and maybe it would have been Nikita Koloff, the guy to take it off of him to put it on Magnum by the following year. But that's, you don't just, if you lose a guy the level of Flair, you don't just say, well, I'm going to go out and get another heel champion. No, you redo the way you orient your territory, because you've still got a huge draw babyface in Dusty Rhodes, and you've got one that you're getting ready. So just fucking switch it. Instead of feeding Flair baby faces all year to get ready for Magnum, you put it on Dusty to keep it warm and keep it important. He is a huge star. You fucking feed him some heels until you get to the right one that you want to fucking drop it to, with the thought of Magnum getting it on the other side after a sufficient period of chase. I would think.
Okay. Well, let's get another question.
Well, apparently you weren't real fucking happy with that answer.
I don't know what the answer would be. I mean, I'm trying to think of something interesting with the Hogan question. There are options. There's Kerry Von Erich. There's Austin Idol. There's different people you think either charisma-wise or just general appeal-wise would work in that spot. Replacing Flair is a lot more difficult.
Exactly. And that's also why that, he had to come with the purchase in '88 when TBS bought the whole thing, because besides that was the one wrestler that Ted Turner actually knew who the fuck he was at that point. He was the franchise for that company, and he never took full advantage of it like he should have. He should have just gone and said, it's either me or Jim Herd completely. He shouldn't have dicked around and I'll just quit as booker and then quit as, he should have just said, before it got out of hand and it was still, the company and the business was still somewhat salvageable, he should have gone to somebody else higher up in TBS and said, me or Herd. That's the one thing he should have done, because I guarantee you, if they'd at that time, they probably would have got rid of Herd. But then a few years later, nobody was important because nobody was making any money in the company.